Hi everyone, my name is Eden Tayyip, the Privacy Enhancing Technologies and Emerging Technologies Fellow here at CIPL. And today, I'm joined with Christian Reimsbach-Kounatze. Thank you for joining me today, Christian.
Hi.
To begin, Christian, could you please tell us a little bit about your role at the OECD?
Yes, I'm happy to do so. So I'm essentially working here at the OECD, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, as an information economist and policy analyst at the OECD Directorate for Science, Technology and Innovation, where I essentially serve as a member of the Secretariat to the OECD Working Party on Data Governance and Privacy. And since 2011, I've been working here on data governance, data-driven innovation, and the economics of data and data sharing.
Great. And I understand that the OECD published its report on emerging privacy-enhancing technologies on March 8th as part of its Going Digital project. And I understand, Christian, that you were one of its chief authors. Could you tell us a little bit about the aim of the report, maybe its motivation, and why you felt like now was the right time for it?
So maybe it's important to take a step back and actually to start by highlighting that privacy enhancing technologies are not a new topic, and certainly not a new topic for the OECD. Already in 2020, we published a report which was called Inventory of Privacy Enhancing Technologies, which basically looked at the different types of privacy enhancing technologies at the time. And it is fair to say that the OECD has recognized since then that digital technologies are not only, I would say, part of the problem when it comes to privacy and data protection, but actually can also be a major part of the solution. And we acknowledge this throughout our work, and including in a more recent OECD report that was published for the G20 presidency of Saudi Arabia in 2020, where we basically highlighted pets. And since then, pets have been on the agenda of the G7 and the G20. So this is one of the reasons why we think that pets, how we like to call it, are worth obviously reflecting on and analyzing. But to answer more precisely the question, why the latest report on emerging privacy enhancing technologies and why right now? The reason is that we noted that a number of stakeholders, including policymakers and regulators, started getting more and more excited about privacy enhancing technologies. We also realized that there was a high need to clarify and explain what privacy enhancing technologies really are, what they are capable of doing, and also what they are not capable of. And so we saw a need to essentially demystify pets. That was the number one kind of motivation, you could say. At the same time, we wanted to bring privacy enhancing technologies to the attention of policymakers and regulators who were in many cases not aware about the current potential of privacy enhancing technologies. Now, if you ask me why there is such a lack of awareness and understanding about pets currently, I would answer that this is because of the high technical and also fast. It explains why a lot of the discussion in the policy-making field may not necessarily take into account the current state of development when it comes to privacy enhancing technologies. And this is a very important point to consider. And maybe last point to explain why now, we also noted that privacy enhancing technologies were covered by an increasing number of initiatives in OECD members and partner economies, including governments and as well as regulators. And one prominent example that I would like to highlight here, given that you are based in the UK, is the ICO guidance on privacy enhancing technology that was released for consultation already in September 2022. And this has been only one example. We noted quite a number of initiatives on pets, and we will certainly talk about that later.
Great. Are there any takeaways? Maybe you could give us a few takeaways, Christian, from your reports to highlight for our members.
Yes, clear. Happy to do so. I mean, I would say there are essentially 5 key takeaway from the report. I mean, and the first one is maybe an obvious one, but I think it's still very important to flag it and to highlight this, namely that privacy-enhancing technologies are not a silver bullet solution. In particular, it's important to stress that they cannot substitute privacy and data protection laws and regulation. Instead, they can complement existing regulations and the law by helping implement privacy protection principles. I think that's basically, I would say, one important key takeaway. The second one is that pets are not only about privacy and data protection, contrary to what the name may suggest, because it's obviously called privacy enhancing technology. But pets are, to a large extent, about confidentiality. So what I mean by this is that not only are pets increasingly used for non-personal data, but often they are used primarily in order to, let's say, for other considerations than those related directly to privacy and data protection. So here I'm thinking, for instance, about protecting or ensuring digital security. I'm thinking about the protection of intellectual property right. And here I would also include trade secrets more broadly. And I would also emphasize that pets are often also used to enhance trust when it comes, for instance, to collaboration between different entities, where there is a need to improve control and how data is being used throughout, let's say, throughout the different arrangements that may exist. And here, privacy enhancing technologies can play an important role. So this was the second key takeaway. The third one relates to what governments and data protection authorities have put in place or are doing. And I alluded to that before. Essentially, we noted that governments and as well as data protection authorities have put in place initiatives that complement the existing privacy and data protection regulations, ranging, for instance, from R&D promotion, though research and development funding, to regulatory sandboxes. And what is really fascinating here, or why it is fascinating, is because these initiatives do demonstrate the high level of, I would say, policy creativity and innovation that we see in some countries. And at the same time, they show that the governance of privacy enhancing technology is not only about regulation. I think this is important. So, because very often we think about regulation as being the main vector. It is certainly a very important vector, but it's not the only vector. How the use of privacy enhancing technology can be governed. So this is the third takeaway. Now, the fourth takeaway is that it is important to differentiate between the different types of privacy enhancing technologies. We tend to talk about privacy enhancing technologies as if all of them were basically equal, but that's certainly not true. And that's why one of the key objectives of our report was to propose a taxonomy that differentiate between different types of pets based on the key common function. So I won't go into the detail because this can be taken out from the report, but I think it's maybe good to remind your audience what are those 4 categories that we identified. One was data obfuscation tools, which typically would include, let's say, your anonymization and pseudonymization approaches or tools. And essentially, they aim to increase privacy protection through obfuscation of the data, as the name suggests. The other one we refer to as encrypted data processing tools, which would typically include your homomorphic encryption, your secure multi-party computation. And these tools are essentially aimed to allow data to be encrypted or protected while they are being used, while they are being processed. Therefore, again, the name. The third tool or type or category of privacy enhancing technologies is referred to as federated and distributed analytics, which a promising example are federated learning algorithms, which essentially allow to execute analytical tasks and processes upon data that is not directly visible or accessible to those executing the task. And last but not least, we included also what we call data accountability tools, which are often not considered as pets, strictly speaking, because they do not aim to protect the confidentiality of data, but still they can help achieve privacy and data protection objective, for instance, by enabling data subjects to have more control over the data. And therefore, we believe they are worth definitely to be listed among the categories that we listed above. And now the last point and the last key takeaway, which essentially is to acknowledge that the benefits and limitation of pets will not only vary depending on the types of privacy enhancing technology of pets, but also on the specific application area or use case for pets. And here, it is very important to acknowledge that different pets are at different level of maturity. And this difference in maturity is reflected in the specific use cases that pets are being considered for. And that's why we concluded for ourselves that it was important to, as a follow-up to our work on this report, to basically focus on specific use cases of pets that we are in the process of basically identifying.
Great. So you say that you wanted to explore the different pets and differentiate between different types. And the report uses the word emerging. Could you tell us a little bit about why that word is used in the report and what it means for the scope of these technologies that were included?
Yes. So as I highlighted before, the OECD had already worked on privacy enhancing technologies in 2002. And obviously, privacy enhancing technologies existed even before that. We didn't invent privacy enhancing technologies, obviously. And therefore, it is very important because we wanted to differentiate between basically what existed in the past and what seems to be emerging right now, we had chosen, we agreed to on this particular word, emerging privacy enhancing technology. So that's basically number one. So what am I referring at if I'm talking about, let's say, more traditional privacy enhancing technologies? Obviously here I'm referring to, for instance, encryption, the use of encryption to protect data at rest or in transit. This has been obviously around for a long time. I'm talking also about anonymization and pseudonymization techniques, which are not new. So the report really put emphasis on some of the more recent emerging pets. And here we noted that the biggest innovation, in particular among startups, and we had the honor to meet quite a number of startups through different occasions. So we noted that a lot of those innovators were working on new types of pets that very few people are familiar with. And we wanted basically to draw policymakers and regulators' attention to those more new privacy enhancing technologies.
And I understand that your report was informed by a questionnaire to your member countries. How are your members thinking about pets? Are they welcoming these technologies?
No, absolutely. I mean, I would definitely emphasize that what really makes this report unique is the direct contribution of our members and partner economies through the questionnaire. And I really would like to take this opportunity to thank all government agencies, all countries that have participated and responded to the questionnaire. So this is important. Number two, and I think this is an important caveat that I'm now about to say, only 22 countries responded to our questionnaire. And this is, if you're familiar with the OECD, you know that this is a low response rate for OECD standards. Also, if you take into account that the OECD has 38 member countries. Now, why am I emphasizing this? Besides the fact that it's always good to know the baseline, so to speak. The reason why I'm emphasizing this is because while thinking about the reason of these low, and there may obviously be a lot of different reasons for the low response rates. I think to some extent, you could make the argument that it also reflects the fact that a number of countries are still not sure what exactly to think about privacy enhancing technology. So it's in particular, when it comes to the emerging privacy enhancing technology, I think there is still a number of countries are still not starting, but I would say thinking and considering what it means exactly for the data governance and privacy frameworks and the policies. So this is number one. Number two. So concretely, in terms of what countries are doing, I mean, we noted two important things. One, we noted that countries have clearly recognized, or more or less clearly, I think that's an important point too that we may discuss later on, have recognized at least that pets are recognized in privacy and data protection frameworks. And the reason why I was hesitating about clearly is because in many instances, pets are reflected rather implicitly in these frameworks. And I think that's something we noted, and we can maybe go into the details later on. I think the other important point, and this is really what I personally found fascinating from the responses that we got, was the high number of complementary and innovative measures that I hinted before, where you have countries focusing on research and development, you have others focusing on regulatory sandboxes, innovation contests, digital identity management. So there's a wide range of complementary policy measures through which pets are being promoted. And this was a very fascinating finding, at least for me.
So as you say, a lot of regulation implicitly talk about pets. So do you think more can be done from a regulatory standpoint to facilitate better use of pets? And does current regulation impede the use of pets, do you think?
I mean, I would certainly not say that regulation automatically impede the use of pets. And as I said, I highlighted that pets are being addressed in regulation more implicitly. And I think this implicit, let's say, role that pets play in regulation may create or may have created some, let's say, uncertainties for users, given that it may not be clear to them what exactly the regulatory implication would be when in case they decided to use pets. And I think this is maybe something that we noted. And I think if you take this into account, you can better understand why a number of data protection authorities have issued guidelines on the use of pets, like the UK ICO that I referred to in the past. And I think this is exactly motivated, among others, to not only raise awareness about the benefits and the potential of pets, but also to provide some guidance what the use of pets could mean in terms of and what regulatory implication that could bring. So this is, I would say, an important point to take into account.
And of course, besides regulation, we've seen other tools that are being used to advance the use of pets. For example, you have the regulatory sandbox in Singapore, the US and UK governments' pets prize challenges. How does the report approach these tools? Are there ways other than regulation to really facilitate the adoption of pets?
Absolutely. I mean, as I said, I mean, for me, this was one of the most fascinating aspect of the report. And as you rightly said, I mean, you already gave some examples that we have highlighted, and you will note that these are really different types of measures. I mean, obviously, when you have an initiative about funding research and development in pets, which is obviously important that we see, for instance, in the United States, that's a different measure than compared to a regulatory sandbox that is, for instance, has been put in place in Singapore. And compared to, let's say, the UK, US pets price challenge, which is also another type of initiative. So I think those different measures try to address different things. the way we like to look at it at the OECD, or you can look at it, is basically on one hand, and I apologize if I may introduce concept, but I'm an economist by education and computer scientist. So I may introduce now concepts that I'm not familiar with your audience, but we like to approach things from you can have a look, you can analyze the situation from a demand side perspective and a supply side perspective. The supply side essentially would be would address how technology suppliers or service providers are what their role is in fostering adoption, and the demand side would obviously address the user side of privacy enhancing technology. So an initiative such as the R&D program obviously targets the technology provider, based on the recognition that the development of privacy enhancing technology requires quite a number of resources. And therefore it is justified for some countries, according to some countries, to provide funding for research and development. On the other hand, you have, for instance, regulatory sandboxes, and what they aim typically to do is to provide an environment where regulators and companies that are willing to try and to test privacy enhancing technologies can have an environment where the, let's say, legal uncertainty and regulatory uncertainty is reduced, mainly thanks to the fact that there is close collaboration or interaction and exchanges between the regulators and the firm. But then there are completely different approaches, and maybe I don't want to spend too much time. I think I've talked already quite some time now, which is related to digital identity management initiative. And the reason why I'm highlighting this right now is because for many people this may not be obvious, the connection between digital identity management and privacy enhancing technologies. And you have, for instance, initiatives such as at the EU level with the digital ID wallet, for instance, a proposal for the digital ID wallet coming up, where there will be a clear and strong implication for the adoption of privacy enhancing technologies, which is not obvious for a lot of people. But why is it important? Is because as governments are promoting, for instance, digital identity management solutions that are privacy preserving, ideally, they would need to also promote, they would indirectly through those initiatives promote the adoption of privacy enhancing technologies.
And finally, Christian, the report concludes that a stronger cross-regulatory approach is needed. Could you please explain why how this conclusion was reached, and if there are any examples of how this could be achieved?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like every kind of digital technology, including in particular also like data in general, those two are always used across sectors or have an important role to play across sectors, right? And given that a lot of the data is very often personal data, it's clear that privacy plays an important role in all these sectors. So when it comes to the use of privacy enhancing technologies, and I just in parentheses, I already before highlighted the fact that privacy enhancing technologies are not only about personal data, but even in cases where it is about personal data, it is important to know that where the use of pets would fall under a regulated sector, there would obviously be a need to have some regulatory cooperation between the data protection authorities and the respective sector authorities that are dealing with the sector. One example that I would like to pick, and I think it's a prominent example because we see a lot of use cases in this area, which is financial markets. We see that there are a number of rules that, for instance, that require financial market institutions or the banks and insurance companies, for instance, to for instance, put measures in place against money laundering, for instance. And a number of these actors are considering now, or have already for a while, considered the use of privacy enhancing technologies. So, but as you can imagine, given that a lot of the data we're talking about are personal data, they obviously also need to take into account what it means in terms of privacy and data protection. So here you have a good example, I think, where there is a need for collaboration between the data protection authorities on one hand and the financial market authorities on the other hand, to make sure that the regulatory measures, but also the recommendations when it comes to the use of pets, are aligned and coherent. And I would say there are similar, obviously, examples in other regulated markets like healthcare, transportation. So there is definitely here a need, and we see actually this happening. And given that I was talking about the UK, we see in the UK, for instance, this happening between the ICO and the corresponding financial market authority.
This is all really interesting, Christian, especially because here at CIPL, we do recognize the potential of pets to mitigate privacy risks and support innovation. So your insights are very well received. And thank you again for joining me today, Christian.
Thank you for your time and for the interview.